Have you ever felt so spiritually empty, so utterly abandoned by God, that you were ready to give up your faith entirely? That moment when prayers seem to echo in an empty universe and spiritual practices feel like hollow rituals leading nowhere. That devastating spiritual crisis, the one where you question everything you've ever believed, might actually be the doorway to your greatest spiritual awakening. Has this ever happened to you? That moment when your faith doesn't just waver, but completely shatters, leaving you in a void of hopelessness? This is exactly what happened to Joel Goldsmith in 1928. Lying in a hotel room, his body ravaged by tuberculosis, doctors had given up all hope. More devastating than his physical condition was his spiritual bankruptcy. Years of dedicated prayer, affirmations, and spiritual techniques had yielded nothing but silence. His faith wasn't just tested, it was utterly broken. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where. In the world you're watching from today, it's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because in that moment of complete surrender, when Joel had absolutely nothing left, something extraordinary happened that would transform not only his understanding of God, but the very nature of spiritual reality itself. The most shocking revelation came when Joel realized that everything he had been doing spiritually was actually reinforcing the very problem he was trying to solve. Every prayer, every spiritual technique, every attempt to reach God was actually cementing the illusion that he was separate from God in the first place. This false sense of separation, this belief that God was somewhere out there and needed to be contacted through special techniques, was the very thing blocking his healing. Stay with me until the end, because what Joel discovered in that hotel room wasn't just another spiritual methodology or technique. It was a fundamental shift in consciousness that not only cleared his tuberculosis within hours, but went on to become the foundation for thousands of documented healings worldwide over 4 decades. The human heart often reaches this crossroads before faith is either abandoned forever or transformed into something unrecognizably deeper. We pray and practice spiritual techniques as if we're separate beings trying to contact a distant deity, never realizing that this very approach reinforces the illusion of separation. What if the greatest barrier to your spiritual breakthrough is not your lack of effort or dedication, but the fundamental misconception about what you are and what God is? What happened next in Joel's experience challenges everything most of us have been taught about prayer, healing, and our relationship with the divine. The transformation that occurred wasn't gradual or partial. It was immediate and complete. But to understand how this is possible, we need to examine the radical shift in perspective that occurred in his consciousness that night. If these insights about our true spiritual identity resonate with you, subscribe to join our community of spiritual explorers. We dive deep into transformative principles that have changed thousands of lives across the world. Joel's revelation that night was so profound it shattered the very foundation of spiritual practice as he'd known it. The journey of transformation began with a startling insight. What if the very act of praying was reinforcing the problem? Think about it. When we pray to God as if reaching out to a separate being, aren't we unconsciously cementing the belief that we're disconnected from the divine in the first place? This mindset shift reveals the hidden paradox at the heart of spiritual struggle. Joel discovered that every prayer, every affirmation, every technique he'd learned was actually working against him in the most fundamental way. By trying to connect with God through spiritual effort, he was reinforcing the very illusion of separation that was blocking his healing. The painful recognition of false identity strikes at the core of our spiritual understanding. We've been taught to pray as if we're here and God is there, as if we're separate entities trying to establish communication across some cosmic divide. But what if this premise is fundamentally flawed? What if the consciousness reading these words right now, your awareness, your being, is itself the presence of God? This revolutionary perspective completely transforms how we understand prayer and spiritual practice. The problem isn't that God won't heal you or answer your prayers. The problem is believing you're separate from God in the first place, which makes every prayer an exercise in reinforcing the very illusion that blocks demonstration. The impact of this revelation goes beyond intellectual understanding. It's a complete rewiring of spiritual DNA. When Joel stopped trying to reach God and instead recognized God as his own true essence, he experienced instantaneous healing, not gradual improvement over months or years, but complete restoration within hours. Behind the scenes of this dramatic healing was a profound shift from seeking to being. We spend our lives searching for something that was never lost, reaching for a connection that was never broken, trying to become something we already are. The journey isn't about becoming more spiritual. It's about recognizing the spirituality that is our fundamental nature. These revelations have nothing to do with religious dogma and everything to do with the direct experience of reality. Joel's understanding went on to transform thousands of lives across 4 decades, not through creating another spiritual method, but by dissolving the need for methods altogether. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic. If the consciousness experiencing these words right now is itself divine presence, what does this mean for our understanding of identity? How does this fundamental shift in perspective change how we approach every aspect of life, from healing to relationships to material circumstances? If you've ever felt that profound sense of disconnect between your spiritual practices and actual results, write in the comments. The illusion of separation, because this might be the exact insight your journey needs. This profound shift from seeking to being represents a complete inversion of our spiritual blueprint. Consider the difference. Seeking implies a journey towards something you don't yet have, while being is simply the recognition of what already is. This mindset transformation is the threshold many encounter just before faith either collapses entirely or undergoes radical renewal. When Joel stopped trying to reach God and instead recognized God as his own true essence, he crossed a boundary that most spiritual traditions only hint at. This wasn't a conceptual understanding, but a lived revelation. Consciousness and its expression are one indivisible reality. Changing what you think you are automatically changes what you experience, because the two cannot be separated. The brilliance of this insight is that it doesn't require years of spiritual practice to achieve. It's available in this very moment through the simple, though not always easy, recognition that what you're seeking has always been your true identity. The gap you've been trying to bridge doesn't actually exist. But this isn't just philosophical theory. The power of this perspective lies in its demonstrable results. Over 4 decades, Joel documented case after case where this recognition of one's true spiritual identity produced immediate, tangible transformation. These weren't gradual improvements. They were often dramatic shifts that defied conventional explanation. A woman diagnosed with terminal cancer was told to prepare for death. Through recognizing her true spiritual identity beyond the physical body, she experienced complete healing within weeks. A businessman facing bankruptcy applied this principle and watched his company transform into unprecedented success. Relationships thought beyond repair blossomed into deeper connection than ever before. The hidden truth in each of these journeys was the same. Problems exist only in the belief that you're a separate person struggling against circumstances. When you recognize yourself as divine consciousness expressing as human experience, the problems dissolve, because the one who seemed to have them never actually existed as separate from wholeness. These weren't isolated incidents or lucky coincidences, but natural results of understanding your real nature. This principle worked with such mathematical precision that Joel could predict the outcomes with remarkable accuracy. The core revelation was always the same. Consciousness aligned with truth automatically demonstrates harmony. The fascinating aspect is how this understanding transcends traditional religious boundaries. It doesn't matter what faith tradition you come from, or even if you come from none at all. The principle operates at the level of consciousness itself, making it accessible to anyone willing to question their fundamental assumptions about identity. Let's explore how this recognition manifests in practical reality. If you are not a human being, occasionally having spiritual experiences, but spiritual being constantly having human experiences, how does this reframe every challenge you face? If you've had a moment where you glimpsed this shift in perspective, even briefly, write in the comments, "I am not seeking, I am being," and let's continue this exploration together. This perspective revolutionizes how we approach every challenge in life. When we examine the nature of problems closely, we discover something remarkable. Problems exist only in the belief that we're separate from divine reality. This isn't abstract philosophy, but practical insight that transforms our daily experience. Consider what happens when you face a health crisis, financial strain, or relationship difficulty. Conventional wisdom says you must overcome these obstacles through effort, strategy, and persistence. But Joel's revelation suggests something radically different: the very foundation of these problems is the belief that you're a separate individual struggling against external circumstances. The breakthrough moment in your spiritual journey often comes with this profound revelation. When you recognize yourself as divine consciousness, expressing as human experience, problems begin dissolving, not because circumstances magically change, but because the person who seemed to have those problems never actually existed separately from wholeness. Subscribe to continue this journey of spiritual discovery with us. Each video explores profound truths that bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and practical transformation in daily life. This isn't positive thinking or manifestation techniques. It's a fundamental shift in identity. The exact realization that transformed everything for Joel was deceptively simple, yet revolutionary. I am not a human being trying to become spiritual through effort and practice. I am spiritual being expressing as human experience right now. The implications of this mindset revolution are staggering. If you're already spiritual being, if that's your fundamental nature, then the entire spiritual journey transforms. You're not working to achieve something you don't have. You're simply removing the barriers to recognizing what you already are. The veil between you and your true identity is nothing more than belief in separation. Behind the scenes of every spiritual tradition, this same truth has been whispered in different languages. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Atman is Brahman. Your Buddha nature is already complete. The packaging varies, but the essence remains. Your true identity has never been separate from the divine. This shift from seeking God to recognizing oneself as God's expression changes everything instantly and permanently. It's not that circumstances magically conform to your wishes, but rather that you stop identifying with the limited self that seemed to be at the mercy of circumstances. Your perspective shifts from being a wave fighting the ocean to recognizing yourself as the ocean appearing as a wave. The journey of awakening isn't about adding something new to yourself, but about stripping away the accumulated beliefs that have obscured your true nature. Each time you catch yourself feeling separate, limited, or lacking, you have an opportunity to remember what you actually are. Not a human seeking connection with the divine, but the divine expressing as human experience. Let's explore how this understanding translates into practical everyday experiences. What happens when this recognition moves beyond theory and becomes your lived reality? How does this fundamental shift in identity transform your approach to healing, abundance, and relationships? If you've begun to sense the profound freedom in this realization, write in the comments, "I am already what I seek." And let's continue exploring this transformative understanding together. Let's see how this understanding manifests in real-world transformation. The blueprint of spiritual healing often becomes most evident when we witness it in action. Margaret's story illuminates this process vividly. After being bedridden for 3 years with a degenerative muscle condition, where doctors offered no hope for recovery, she had exhausted every spiritual method available with zero success. When Margaret first encountered Joel's teaching, she initially resisted because it seemed too simple compared to the complex healing techniques she had been practicing. Her resistance reflects our common tendency to believe that profound transformation must require elaborate methods or intense effort. The breakthrough in her healing journey arrived during a quiet morning when she stopped trying to heal her body and simply rested in the truth of her spiritual identity beyond physical form. The revelation for Margaret wasn't that she was a person with a diseased body asking God for healing, but that she was God's own consciousness expressing perfectly, and her body was simply the reflection of that perfect spiritual reality that had never been sick or limited. The mindset revolution happened at the level of identity, not technique. Within 6 months, Margaret wasn't just walking perfectly, she was teaching this principle to others with remarkable success. Her recovery wasn't gradual improvement over time, but a fundamental shift in her understanding of what she actually was. The body responded to this change in consciousness because matter always reflects the level of spiritual understanding we demonstrate consistently. Margaret later said the hardest part wasn't learning the principle, but accepting that she had always been perfect spiritual being. The illness existed only in false human belief, not in her true identity as God's consciousness. This same principle transforms every dimension of human experience, including material circumstances. Robert, a successful lawyer, found himself facing complete financial ruin after losing everything in a market crash. His situation appeared absolutely hopeless as he attended Joel's classes, desperate for a miracle. Instead of techniques for attracting money or manifesting wealth, Joel taught him to recognize his true identity as the very source and substance of all supply and expression. Robert's transformation began when he stopped seeing himself as a person lacking money and started recognizing himself as infinite abundance appearing in human form. This wasn't positive thinking or mental manipulation, but spiritual realization based on the actual truth of being. He began making decisions from abundance consciousness rather than fear of loss or scarcity thinking. Within 18 months, Robert had not only recovered all his losses, but built greater wealth than he had ever experienced before. The journey behind the scenes was not about manipulating external circumstances, but realigning his consciousness with his true identity. More significantly, he never again experienced financial anxiety because he understood his true relationship to supply. He discovered that consciousness of abundance creates abundant experience, not the other way around as most people believe. Let's explore how this same principle applies to our closest relationships, which often reveal our deepest beliefs about ourselves and our connection to the divine. How does recognizing your true spiritual identity transform the most intimate connections in your life? If you've experienced a moment when shifting your consciousness transformed your circumstances, write in the comments, "Consciousness creates experience," and I'd love to hear about your breakthrough moment. The landscape of our relationships often reveals our deepest spiritual beliefs more clearly than anything else. Sarah's story illuminates this truth perfectly. After 20 years of marriage, she faced what appeared to be irreparable damage. Her husband's betrayal had completely destroyed her happiness and sense of self-worth, leaving her convinced that her pain was entirely caused by his actions. Through Joel's teaching, Sarah discovered something that revolutionized her understanding of love and relationships. She realized that trying to get love from another person, making her happiness dependent on her husband's behavior, was the very thing keeping her from experiencing the infinite love that was already her essence. The breakthrough insight wasn't about fixing her husband or salvaging the marriage through techniques or communication strategies. It was the profound recognition that she wasn't a person lacking love, but love itself, expressing through individual being. This revelation shifted her entire orientation to the relationship. Instead of relating from emptiness, seeking fulfillment, she began relating from wholeness, sharing abundance. The remarkable aftermath reveals the ripple effect of consciousness transformation. As Sarah's consciousness of love expanded and deepened, her husband experienced his own spontaneous transformation without any direct effort on her part. Their marriage not only healed completely, but became deeper and more fulfilling than ever before. Sarah discovered the hidden truth that turns relationship dynamics upside down. Love is not something you get from relationships, but something you are that expresses through relationships. When you know yourself as love, every person in your experience reflects that love back to you, because consciousness and its reflection are one indivisible reality. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic. How do we move these profound realizations from conceptual understanding to lived experience? Joel developed specific practices that made this spiritual recognition practical in daily life. The cornerstone practice was what he called spiritual treatment, though not the kind you might expect from traditional religious approaches. This wasn't about asking God to change conditions, but recognizing what already exists in spiritual reality right now in this moment. When faced with any challenge, instead of trying to solve it through human effort and struggle, you pause and recognize God doesn't know this problem, because God only knows perfection. Since I am God's consciousness in expression, this problem exists only in false human belief, not in my true spiritual reality where only harmony exists. This recognition dissolves the very foundation that seemed to support the problem in the first place. Joel discovered that problems persist because we acknowledge them as real and then try to overcome them through human effort. The paradigm shift comes when you recognize that infinite perfection is the only reality, and you are that reality in expression. Problems are then revealed as false appearances that dissolve naturally. The key insight is that consistency in this recognition proves far more powerful than intensity of effort. Small, frequent acknowledgements of spiritual truth create more lasting transformation than occasional dramatic spiritual experiences followed by return to limitation thinking. If you've ever experienced a moment when recognizing your true nature shifted a relationship in your life, put in the comments, "I am love expressing," and share a glimpse of your experience with our community. Another essential practice that Joel developed is what he called dying to material sense throughout your daily experience. This mental discipline forms the backbone of consistent spiritual awareness. Throughout your day, catch yourself in those moments when you believe you're just a material body subject to physical laws, a person with limited resources, or someone who can be hurt by external circumstances. Each time you notice this limited perspective taking hold, gently return to recognizing your spiritual identity as God's consciousness expressing in form. The journey of transformation happens in these small moments of awareness, the decision points where you choose which identity you're living from. This isn't about denying human experience or pretending problems don't exist, but seeing them correctly from a spiritual perspective. The revelation that changes everything is realizing you're not a mortal being, occasionally having spiritual moments during prayer or meditation. Your spiritual being eternally expressing in what appears as human form. Your body, circumstances, and relationships are all reflections of this spiritual reality, not separate from it. The blueprint for this practice involves making this recognition as natural as breathing, as automatic as your heartbeat. Every thought that assumes separation from God, every fear that imagines lack or limitation, every worry that pictures yourself as vulnerable becomes an opportunity to remember and return to the truth of your divine nature, expressing perfectly right now. The mindset revolution doesn't aim to eliminate human experience, but to see it from such a high level of spiritual understanding that it harmonizes naturally without struggle. When consciousness is established in truth, that truth expresses automatically through every aspect of your experience without exception. Joel also taught what he called standing porter at the door of thought as an essential spiritual discipline. This practice recognizes a fundamental principle. Since consciousness creates experience, guarding your consciousness from false beliefs becomes the most practical activity you can engage in for transforming your life. This isn't positive thinking or wishful imagination, but spiritual discernment based on what's actually true about God and your relationship to God. When thoughts of lack arise, you don't fight them or try to replace them, but recognize God's supply is infinite, and I am that supply in expression. When thoughts of illness appear, you acknowledge God's perfection is my true body. The hidden truth behind this practice is that you're not trying to convince yourself of something false or manipulate your mindset to feel better temporarily. You're aligning with spiritual reality that already exists. The journey isn't about creating something new, but remembering what's eternally true. As you develop this spiritual discernment, false beliefs gradually lose their power to disturb your peace or influence your demonstrations. The power of this perspective grows as we apply it to our most challenging circumstances. How does this understanding transform our approach to chronic issues that have resisted all previous attempts at healing or resolution? If you've experienced moments when guarding your thoughts transformed your experience, write in the comments, "I stand porter at my consciousness," and share what shifted for you in that moment of awareness. Perhaps the most liberating revelation in this entire spiritual journey is the freedom from the endless cycle of self-improvement. So many spiritual paths focus on becoming better, more enlightened, more worthy of divine love through dedicated practice and effort. But what if the very premise of self-improvement is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? The paradigm shift occurs when you realize that problems exist only in false human belief, not in your actual spiritual identity as God's consciousness. This understanding dissolves the guilt, fear, and burden of trying to heal or improve yourself through spiritual practice. The breakthrough insight is that you don't need to become worthy of perfection. You need only to recognize the perfection that already exists as your true nature. This revelation turns conventional spiritual wisdom upside down. Instead of seeing yourself as broken and needing repair, you recognize that what appears as imperfection exists only in the realm of false belief. Your authentic identity as divine consciousness has never been damaged, limited, or separated from wholeness. The mental framework that emerges from this understanding is radically different from most spiritual approaches. Healing happens naturally when you stop believing there's anything that needs healing. Demonstration occurs effortlessly when you stop trying to demonstrate and simply be what you already are. infinite perfection in expression. Joel emphasized that spiritual work isn't about changing yourself, but about recognizing what you've always been beneath all human concepts and beliefs. The moment you truly accept your divine nature, every area of your life begins reflecting that acceptance through harmonious experience. The journey culminates in what Joel described as the ultimate recognition, the final transformation before faith is either completely lost or profoundly renewed. This is the recognition that you are not seeking God because you are not separate from God. You are God's own consciousness, appearing as individual being, expressing perfectly in every moment regardless of external appearances or temporary human conditions that suggest otherwise. This revelation doesn't require faith, belief, or spiritual effort to make it true. It requires only the willingness to stop believing in separation and to acknowledge what has always been true. You are divine being having a human experience, not human being occasionally connecting with divine presence through prayer or spiritual practice. The brilliance of this understanding is its simplicity. There's no complex theology to master, no intricate practices to perfect, no hierarchical system to climb. There's only the recognition of what is already true about your nature and the gradual allowing of that truth to express more fully through your human experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic. How does this ultimate recognition translate into daily life? How do we navigate the apparent contradictions between our spiritual identity and the human challenges we still seem to experience? What happens when we embrace this understanding not just intellectually, but as our lived reality, moment by moment? If this liberating perspective on spiritual identity resonates with you at a deep level, write in the comments, "I am already whole," and share which aspect of this understanding speaks most directly to your heart. As we reach this moment together, I hope you can feel the profound shift in perspective that Joel Goldsmith experienced that night in 1928. The realization that you're not separate from the divine isn't just another spiritual concept, it's the foundation for a completely transformed life experience. It's the recognition that changes everything. If these ideas have resonated with you today, I'd love to continue this journey together. Subscribe to our channel for more explorations of transformative spiritual insights that cut through conventional thinking and reveal the deeper truths of our existence. Each week, we dive into these profound understandings that have the power to completely reshape your experience of life, healing, and spiritual identity. I found that these principles become even more powerful when shared in community. If this message spoke directly to your heart today, leave a comment saying, "I am not separate," so I know you made it to the end of this exploration. Your perspective matters, and I read every comment personally. If you found value in today's video, gently tap that like button. It's a simple way to help these ideas reach others who might be at that critical point in their spiritual journey, that moment before faith is either abandoned or transformed into something far more profound. There's a video right here that explores how this understanding transforms our approach to healing and wholeness. Click and continue with me over there as we take this understanding even deeper into practical application in daily life. Until we connect again, remember, what you're seeking has never been separate from what you are.